Welcome to episode 96 of the Cycling Europe podcast. My name is Andrew Sykes, and we're continuing in my January 2026 quest in order to catch up on podcasts that have been recorded but not yet published. And this is the case with episode 96. It's the second of hopefully what will be 4 podcasts in January of 2026. And last week, episode 95, we heard from Claire Davis talking about cycling from one end of the country to the other, Britain and elsewhere. And in this episode, we're going to hear from Tom Cartledge. 13 years ago, he decided with a friend to cycle to India via Europe and the Middle East, spending a lot of his time in Iran, which is a country that is on everybody's minds at the moment. And I began by asking him to introduce himself.
My name's Tom Cartledge. I've done a couple of cycling journeys across the world, done a lot of backpacking around the world, maybe part-time adventurer, otherwise work in sales, and a happy father living in the Netherlands, but originally from the hills of Yorkshire.
Okay, and you're obviously in a good place to be a cyclist, the Netherlands. It's probably no better place to be a cyclist. Have you always been a cyclist? Have you always been somebody who has used 2 wheels for various purposes?
That's a good question. I suppose as a child, I was always brought up on bikes. Looking back, I wish I'd maybe had more introduction into racing communities in the United Kingdom, but I don't think that was readily available. I've always used it as a modem of transport, right? But wasn't so much into long distance as I was growing up. That really wasn't accessible to me and to my family, I don't think. But then, of course, living in the Netherlands, as you say, you use it to go to the toilet. You use it for absolutely everything. So even as much to the fact that I lost my driver's license because I just let it petter out, because you don't need it over here, right? Like, it's cycling utopia. Back at home in the UK, for me, doesn't feel as safe and as kind of easy, but definitely something I'd love to do more of, actually, in the United Kingdom. Yeah.
It's 13 years since you did the journey to India. Had you, before doing that or before coming up with that idea, had you any experience whatsoever of longish distance cycling?
Yeah. So before that, I'd done another cycle around Iceland, the classic kind of Route 1 from Reykjavik to Reykjavik, writing blogs, writing some stuff for a Dutch magazine about that as well. Took 2 friends with me, one who would come in around half an hour after me, and the other one would come in about half an hour after him. So it's very much a introduction, actually, into pace and learning that cycling when you're on a long kind of route is not about going super fast, right? It's not about putting the lycras on and doing 45 kilometers an hour. It's actually about enjoying, stopping, finding solace in beautiful views and vistas, and actually getting more into touch with the culture that you're cycling through, right? So yes, a bit of a cycle around Iceland, some cycling in Yorkshire, like day cycles here and there, some cycling in the Netherlands, but nothing on that scale where I'm going across multiple borders. No.
Iceland's a strange place to choose for your first cycle tour. I can't imagine many people. Most people would do, I don't know, they'd go to the Lake District or they'd head to northern France and do a few days there. Kind of going to Iceland is a bit hardcore for your first cycle tour.
Yeah, maybe it gives you a key into the fact of unpreparedness and maybe overshooting my understanding of what should be possible. Maybe that's a key way in. I always set myself a bit of a challenge, or like to. Whether you come up short, that shouldn't really matter, right? It's about getting on the bike and going. The 3 of us saw it as a great adventure in the summer. I'd lived in Scandinavia at that point, in Sweden. So I was very interested in Scandinavian mythology, and had hooked up with a Dutch journalist who basically said they'd pay me some money and give us a bit of like funds to go around Iceland, discovering some culture. And that's what we did. It just seemed like something to do. It didn't seem so hardcore. Andrew, at first, right? We just thought, let's go. We hadn't thought about the crazy winds. We knew we were going in summer, and I use those inverted commas, right? Because summer in Iceland it makes Scarborough look like Scarbados. But what a place to be. What a place to throw yourself into the elements and see whether you float. It was, yeah, phenomenal. Have you been?
I've never been. No. Would you recommend it as a place to go?
If you're happy with camping, yes, most definitely, because Scandinavia have kind of the right to camp wherever you want, right? As long as you leave it cleaner than where you found it, the way you found it. If you're seeing a house or a building on the horizon, it's always the kind of rule of thumb: knock on the door, ask if you can camp at the bottom of the meadow or something like this. But absolutely phenomenal. I mean, there's one route that goes all the way around the island. You can deviate from here and there, but you are literally looking at volcanic landscapes. You're looking at one point where you've got Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth on another volcano peninsula. You have, beautiful little villages that you come into contact with, and then tiny cities. I mean, you're talking like 17,500 people. Do you know what I mean? 20K people, and you float through them, but they're very happy to see someone that's not from there. So that's what I enjoy, is always when you get there and you're an invited stranger. I like that moment of conversation. So, and Icelanders like to converse. Yeah.
You were camping. It's quite it's a hardcore place to camp, I would have thought, Iceland.
So. Not too crazy. Not in the summer. In the winter, yeah, I would say so. Although I say that now, one of the first days we made it out of Reykjavik heading north, and the wind was too intense to put up our 3-man tent that we had. And luckily, like, we were on a tiny little road going into a fjord, and some car actually pulled up alongside us because the wind started pushing us towards the edge of to the edge of the tiny little lane. And she walked us along as a barrier and basically said, you can leave your bikes in the shed over there from my neighbour, and you can come and stay in my summer house. Nobody's staying there at the moment. Just let us stay for free for the night. So the kindness of strangers definitely helps, right?
Yeah. Right, you come back from Iceland, and you then, subsequently, you decide to cycle to India. How did that come about?
So myself and Reese, who I cycled with, we'd done a hitchhiking trip from Amsterdam up to Oslo the year before. I was living in Amsterdam. He was still living back in Harrogate, and I'd come back across for the Christmas period. Was not exactly happy with the job that I was doing with Nike at the time, and was wanting adventure. Right. So we had an amazing conversation in one of our old bars, Monty's Rock Cafe. Probably a little bit drunk, where all the best kind of ideas come from. And towards the end of the night, we settled on India. I'd traveled there before, he hadn't. And I really wanted to try and get a trip that would be more about that between the A and the B. And not A and B being Harrogate and India, A and B being your daily A and B. Okay, like, how do you travel slowly through the countryside rather than being on a train, rather than being in a car and seeing things that just fly past you that, you know, you would like to actually engage with. And that was the whole kind of antithesis of it. We, I suppose, like drunken pirates, thought we were heroes straight away. And then the planning started, and that's where we really realized that we were not maybe modern day adventurers, and we just kind of threw ourselves into the what if, and we've got to go with this, right? This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And yeah, bless Reese, he smoked 40 cigarettes a day before we left as well.
And in terms of a route, did you just make it up as you went along, or did you have something planned? And what route did you actually take when you were cycling?
Good idea. Yeah. So we had a rough route. Of course, you're going across to India. You know, there's going to be some areas that you're going to have to make a bit of a decision. That comes around Central Asia. How do we get into India, right? So the Pakistani visa is the key point there, that you have to get it in your home country, but you have to use it within a certain period of time. I really wanted to see where Joseph Jugashvili came from. So Georgia was naturally on the map, although I knew really nothing about it. So I started researching that. I wanted to originally go to Central Asia to go see Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, all of these places, and try and come through Afghanistan into Pakistan or India. Also, the ulterior route was to go through China and come down through Tibet. All of these areas, right? Not very easy to kind of cycle through to get into India politically. It changed massively on the road, actually, because of an incident that happened when we got into Georgia. So we had a rough plan of going through Europe across the north just to kind of mitigate the Alps for our untrained thighs and the time of year that we set off in March. We didn't want to be too cold, too early. We pretty much got sunshine all the way from Austria all the way through to the very end of the trip. But the moment of the crux was, as I was saying, we got into Georgia and we were trying to get into a country that didn't exist called Abkhazia, which is in the north near the Russian border, just because we wanted to see what this breakaway was all about. And we got robbed in a town in a city called Zugdidi, which most people have probably never heard of, right? It's on the border of Caucasus, a country which most people have never heard of. And we stayed there for 3 days. That's the start of the book as well, is the start of this amazing adventure that you never think these things will ever happen. We had to have the local English teacher was our translator. And then after 3 days of basically being treated by the cops, they found everything and sent us on to Tbilisi. And then the route changed. We needed to get passports updated because they were water damaged. We needed to get all sorts of things changed. And we stayed in Tbilisi for about 6-8 weeks. We met lots of amazing Georgians, but we also met a lot of amazing Iranians. And therefore that kind of charmed us to go and see their country, right? We'd suddenly met these people and we'd had this stereotype that it was one of the most dangerous places in the world to go to. And coincidentally turned out to be one of the most amazing places that I've ever been to in 10 years plus of doing travels. So we ended up traveling down through Iran to Bandar Abbas, taking a boat to the United Arab Emirates. We tried to do the old Michael Palin thing of hitchhiking some boats along the Gulf to India. Couldn't actually. Apparently, they don't go very far anymore. And then we had to take, unfortunately, a flight from the United Arab Emirates into Mumbai and then cycle up to Udaipur, where we finished in the very end on Diwali, which was what a party to finish on, right? Like the Festival of Light.
Right. Okay. There are lots of questions there. Now, first of all, it sounded the book you said starts in Georgia, so basically the book doesn't cover any of the journey in Europe. Was it a fairly straightforward, uneventful journey through Western Europe?
No. The book starts in Mise-en-Res, so it starts in the middle with a punch, the things that you don't expect, and then after that moment of what's happening, we move back into the planning and we go through Europe. So then. No, Europe was definitely not uneventful. If you imagine, which you've probably done as well, Andrew, right? Cycling along ice-filled roads where you have a thickness of an inch of ice and you have sheets of snow flying at you. Google Adventures was probably the map at the time when we had to download because we didn't have roaming. We didn't really have cycling lights. And then I think as we got out of Prague, that was when the river actually there back up had flooded about a month afterwards. So it was a fortuitous time to set off early spring or late winter. Yeah. But it was definitely adventurous and it was definitely worth doing. You've cycled through Europe so much, right? And the communities, the people, the change of small borders that you cycle over sometimes without even noticing, but then you've changed into a different language. There's different food. There's different vistas of different ways of looking at life. Suddenly you go from commercialist to an ex-communist kind of like area. It's stunning. It's a brilliant place to be. And I still think Europe's one of the most amazing places in the world to travel. Yeah.
Mm. And did you cycle around the Black Sea or did you cross the Black Sea?
Yeah. So when we got down to Istanbul, after stopping there for a week, we basically traversed to the north, and then the idea was if we have the Black Sea on our left, literally if we have the Black Sea on our left hand side, then we're heading in the right direction, we're heading east. So we cycled across the north of Turkey and literally stayed on that route, which was again unbelievable.
And what month were you in Turkey? How long had it taken you to get from the UK?
So from the UK to get to Turkey was about 3-4 months to get all the way across. And then we spent 3 months in Georgia.
Oh, wow. Right, this incident in Georgia where you were robbed, was it I mean, you mentioned not having a passport and having your passport stolen. Was it a face-to-face robbery, or was it from your hotel room or from your campsite, or wherever you were staying?
So we'd had an unusual experience with the police the night before in a city called Potti, which is like where there's a British petroleum oil rig off the coast. We'd managed to stay in like a beautiful field of flowers. Like after that, we'd cycled up basically into the mountains and then gone into a small eatery to have some Georgian food. And as we were even discussing the name Abkhazia, there was a lot of the locals kind of looking at us, right? We're not talking in Kartvelian in Georgian, but I think they could hear that tone, and we were getting a lot of strange looks because a lot of Georgians were moved out of Abkhazia forcefully by the Russians in the 90s. So it was already feeling kind of tense. We'd left the bikes outside, no locks. Why would you? Because like cycling through Turkey and Southeast Europe, you get a lot of old men just fiddling around with your brakes and your tires, and they're just curious, right? So there was no need to, but we had some refuse we needed to get rid of. I think we wanted to have a cigarette as well, so we moved into this boulevard, this kind of, I suppose, parkway almost in the middle of the city that was surrounded by a road. And just as we dropped off the litter and we were having a smoke, we saw this guy fiddling away with the bikes. And we saw what we thought we saw was a large blade. And you're talking about kind of like that 30, 40 centimeter style kind of size of a knife. And we're like, no, double look, this can't be true. And this is kind of the opening of the book, is that moment of it's a red light, you can't cross the road, there's 3 lanes of traffic. And we see him just picking apart one of our pannier bags, which happens to have electronics in it, passports in it. We, for some reason, clumped them together. And then, we have to give chase. And we're in a city that we don't know, we've never really heard of, northern Georgia. And he happened to run past a European Union building with the flags outside. I lost him, luckily. I wasn't sure whether I'd seen the blade. And then the cops came. And that's how we kind of, got into the moment.
And do you think it was... You don't think there's a connection between the robbery and what you had been saying in the cafe? Do you think somebody was onto you? Do you think somebody had identified you as a Westerner who was potentially had loads of stuff to nick in your panniers?
I don't know. I think generally from the area, I think Georgia at that time, as a tourist destination, even now, right, as a tourist destination, is not huge. Most people go to Tbilisi, or they go to Batumi, or they maybe go to the wine vineyards outside of towards the east. They don't go up into the north, up towards Abkhazia. They don't go towards South Ossetia. They don't go to these areas which have been broken away from Georgia, right? Which politically already have some kind of friction, sandpaper. Most Georgians are incredibly, and I mean 99.9% of them are incredibly nice, hospitable people, would drag you into their house and put you at the head of the table, right? And make you the treasured guest. I think we just got struck by a bad luck. But then what came after it was the hospitable nature of the local police force and how they looked after us. We camped. We got given the option to go to a local guest house to go and stay with grandma and granddad, or to camp on the police compound, which was armed guarded 24 hours a day by AK-47s. You know which one we chose straight away, was sleep next to the fountain, because this is like one of the coolest places to camp in the world. And, have your morning showers with your pink towels on as there's cops with muscles upon muscles, that kind of stereotypical look of Russian Georgian men. Seeing these 2 skinny white guys from Yorkshire piddling through to go to the shower was quite a scene, yeah.
And you said you spent 3 months in Georgia. Is that because it took you 3 months to get hold of all the documents and bits and pieces and to re-equip, or was it for other reasons?
That, and then that was probably about 6 weeks. There was a new passport coming across from Liverpool. We went down to Tbilisi afterwards. We were instructed to go and see the embassy anyway. And then, they found everything. The cops found everything within 3 days, right? They were so amazing. They had, it's an incredible story that they actually found all this stuff, except for my friend's belt. Reese's Belt is somewhere still in northern Georgia. We go down to Tbilisi. Suddenly we make friends through couch surfing, not through staying with people, but meeting up with locals that then become like a gateway. And Khatia, this girl that we met there, we suddenly got introduced to her friends. They worked in the media. She was a cellular biologist who's now gone on to give like TED Talks and stuff. So we got really introduced to an amazing group of friends in Tbilisi. But then the onward movement was the decision. Do we go on through Russia and go back north? If you know anything about Georgia and Russian politics, it's not easy to go to a Russian embassy because there isn't one. So you had to go and try and find a desk in the Swiss embassy, but the guy was never there. The other decision was to go to Azerbaijan and then take the boat out to Kazakhstan. That was the preferred, still dream route. But every time we went to the Azerbaijani embassy, they changed the prices. Even if we went to Batumi to try and go to the consulate over there, the price would change. You need to have a letter of introduction. We only wanted a passage to go basically to the boatyard. And then we met all of these nice Iranians, like I told you before, in the hostel that we were staying at, that suddenly changed that idea. Could we go to Iran? So after searching online, we found out we needed to apply online first for a pre-visa to be able to even go to the embassy. That was awarded. That was like $20. And then we go to this gilded embassy in this edge of the city, got invited in, and then it took about 6 weeks for them to process the Iranian visa for us. And then when the visa came, the stamp in our passport, we had to go and pay a bit of bakshish to get it the same day. Otherwise, it would be after the weekend. And then it was printed, not even on the lines. It was printed slightly wonky. So we thought, oh, now we're going to invest to go through Armenia. And we don't even know if this is going to work when we get to the south of Armenia, right? But hey, we got to try. So yeah, it was 6 weeks of recovery and then 6 weeks of planning and how do we actually move on from there.
You said that all your stuff was found by the Georgian police. So why did you need a new passport? What was wrong with the old one?
So it was water damaged, heavily water damaged, and I was running out of space, to be honest, anyway. So it was more of a kind of like insurance policy, just in case as well. Like if we get into Iran, just in case, I need all of those extra kind of like sheets, just in case. I think the water damage really played on the mind, though. The quality, it was not, it was not good.
Yeah. I mean, you're not the first person I've spoken to who has been to Iran and said how wonderful and welcoming the people are. I think the worries that people have, I mean, I'm speaking from my perspective here as somebody who has never been anywhere near Iran, but would be reluctant to go to Iran, not because of the people, but because of the authorities and the people in charge and the way in which they might exploit the situation of a foreign tourist. And there are lots and lots of examples. I think there are people there now who are in prison. There was a story recently about 2 motorcyclists, I think, who are still locked up in Iran. Was that a concern at the time, or is that 13 years ago? Was that less of an issue?
There was definitely an American political build-up for next door, right? Still, I think there was another build-up with Iraq that was on our mind because of the spillover. I think the political image of Iran externally has never, from our side, right, from our angle, has never really been easy. We were being told by a lot of friends and family that, this could be the last calls that we have, which was spooky, more from a kind of like the personal connection. But I think we were more on that antithesis of youth, where you have less risk. You are less risk averse to be. You just think this is the next adventure, the next layer of the adventure cake, and there's certain countries that you want to start moving into to find out whether it's going to be true or not. And there's got to be a point of your life, I think, when you're diving that deep into adventure, that you have to start taking those next doorways, right? You have to start going through them, and it proved to be one of the best places ever to have visited. We didn't have any kind of resistance from the authorities at any point. I think we were told to maybe turn off our GoPro once because we were probably cycling near to something. Not sure, but we're on a highway. Other than that, I think the first city we got into, I've never, ever, ever had this anywhere, Andrew, but like as we got into this first city, the like Prince's City in the north west of the country, there must have been 1,000 people shook our hands, and it took half an hour wherever we walked on the streets with our bikes. And at this point, we'd been joined by another couch surfing buddy that we'd met the year previous on that trip from Oslo. He sold his apartment to join us, flew down to Armenia. He joined us as well. And there's three of us just trying to find accommodation, and people stopping and saying, "Hey, if you don't find anything, here's my number. Welcome to Iran. Give me a call." Next person 5 feet away wanted to shake our hands. Women as well, right? Like, saying, "Hey, welcome to Iran. Welcome to Iran. What are you doing here? Why are you here? But thank you for coming." And that was the message, I think, through the whole of the country. People just so happy that you were there.
Did you have any feeling that you were being observed or followed or monitored in any way?
Not more than in India or China or Egypt, where you have to, hand over your passport and fill in some documents when you stay in a registered guest house. No, there was otherwise no police that would follow us if we stayed at the kind of Green Crescent, which is a bit like the what do you call it on the roads over in the United Kingdom, like not the Red Stars. Anyway, like a kind of authority that would maybe like help people on the roads. No, like nobody followed, nobody checked on us, not at all. Not even like the border way in. People would just like drop in their AK-47s to shake our hands and say, "What are you doing here?" and welcome. It was beautiful.
And did your visa, was it time limited? Did you have a certain amount of time to cross Iran? Or
1 month, and you're thinking then to come in from Armenia, and you've got to get all the way across because we wanted to see Tehran. Like, of course, we needed to see Tehran, and then we had some kind of idea that we wanted to see Shiraz. We wanted to see maybe another city in that kind of area, not because of specifics, just it seemed to be the right kind of route. And then we wanted to head down to Bandar Abbas because we knew we could get the ferry out. The only thing at that time, which I think has changed now, which put a little bit of worry, was the fact that none of the ATMs worked. So we needed to take in all of our cash in dollars and split between euros. And there was no British embassy there. So the fact that we had our Norwegian friend with us at that point gave us a little bit more relief because the Norwegians still had a consulate there. But yeah, that was a little bit of worry, carrying all cash on you and thinking how expensive is it going to be? And then Iran becomes very confusing with their Tuma system where there's an inflation of the currency, right? And then they drop off locally a lot of the zeros so they don't have to write out trillions of zeros. But that confuses the hell out of you when you're going to buy things at first and you have no idea of this, or even a system they use called Tarov, where they politely try to give you things when you're buying them, and you have to go through this dance of three things where you say, no, and you try to give them your money. They say, no, please take it, until the third time, and then they say, okay. They take it. But yeah, it's very easy to almost walk away on the second attempt, right?
I'm just looking at the map here of Iran, and you've got the Caspian Sea to the north. And basically, if I switch on the satellite image, very little of Iran has got much greenery. It is basically the bit by the Caspian Sea, and then the rest of it, from the perspective of a satellite image, is pretty barren. What was it like cycling across that, what looks like a fairly hostile, barren environment?
I think you've already summed it up. I think the road surface was one of the differences because of the heat. I mean, we're talking plus 40. I've got Irish jeans. That was incredible. So covered in shirts that I could buy at local kind of bazaars, right? Not just my normal T-shirts or anything. So the heat was incredible. That came with the wind. But the surface on most of the highways that we particularly cycled on was incredibly sticky. So something that you might not notice in a car because you're flying over it much quicker. But yeah, that became more viscous almost. It felt like it was slowing you down sometimes. Of course, when you're cycling into a headwind for a long time as well, when it's incredibly hot and when you've got a lot of 3 lanes of traffic next to you, that can be pretty intense. But it also brought, I think, a total difference to the rest of the trip. We hadn't had this vista before. We'd had like Turkey, the north of Turkey was incredibly green. Georgia was green. The south of Armenia started to become a bit more amber. But then most of Iran was waking up, sleeping in deserts. But again, people would see you on an evening sometimes and then like cycle out or drive out in the morning to bring you tea and breakfast, like come and find you. It was bonkers, was amazing. Yeah. Or invite you to come and stay at their house when you get 500 kilometers down the road.
It must have been a bit of a shock because, again, I'm looking at the satellite image here. It must have been a bit of a shock actually getting to India. India is basically, the whole thing is green, whereas obviously the Middle East is all yellow and brown because it's full of desert and treeless landscapes. So what was it like arriving you said you arrived in Mumbai, I think. What was it like arriving there? Was it a bit of a culture shock?
I've been to India before, so culture shock, not so much. But I think any moment, any place you arrive in India, it's always like, insult would be the wrong word, but a kind of a barrage, right, of senses, sound, sight, smells, taste, whether they're good or bad. But energy. I think India has this fantastic energy. You arrive in Mumbai, it's an incredibly big city. You already know that's going to happen. Luckily, we had a couch surfer to stay with who happened to be incredible, and then also write some like lines out for us in Marathi that we could use as we were cycling further up in Maharashtra. That was interesting. But then on the roads, as you start going further north, you'll probably see on the map towards Surat. We went a little bit further east than Surat. Was then suddenly like what you might imagine stereotypically like the Jungle Book, right? Like jungles just firing out of the side of the highways. But then the highways in India not so heavily or not so densely packed like some of the other countries we'd been through. But then you would have cars or tuk-tuks flying down the wrong side of the highway, and you're on the hard shoulder. That was confrontational. So India was topsy-turvy. India was another planet. India was and is energy, which is inspiring. Yeah. So it was amazing to be there, though. Yeah.
And you said you were aiming for Udaipur, is that right?
Well, originally we were aiming for New Delhi because there was an office there from the railway children, right, that we were cycling for. But then we'd lost a little bit of contact right towards the end. So I had been to Delhi before. My friend had never been to India. And we knew that Diwali was coming up. So Udaipur was kind of falling into the timescale for this. And if you've ever seen any pictures of Udaipur, it's the White City. It is absolutely drop your jaw gorgeous. So we got there for this festival. We happened to be on a rooftop terrace in a Korean Indian hostel. And as the sun was coming down and it was all pinky purples and whites around this place, it just seemed like the perfect moment to control your destiny and say, this is the end. And let's give away the bicycles to, some local kids. Let's get in touch with New Delhi, but let's do that on a different kind of way. And let's control our destiny and call this the end. Yeah. I think we'd done enough kilometers by that point to deserve that.
Yeah, I'm looking at pictures now, and it's I'm tempted to say I recognise some of those pictures because they are very iconic. Is it an iconic location?
Are you a fan of 007? Or maybe seen some of the old 007s? That's where Octopussy was filmed, and that was her palace in the middle. So they go crazy about the marketing for that, but it's also filmed in Varanasi. It's also filmed in Goa. It's also filmed in it's like filming everything across Europe and saying it's all from one place. But that's some of the staple kind of Rajasthan architecture as well from the Rajputs, which is fun, like incredible, right? And then each of these cities in Rajasthan have different colors associated with them. Yeah, you can have the blue city, the pink city. It's amazing. And actually cycling there was a bit hairy at points, but all in all, incredible again to be there. Yeah. Very welcoming.
So that was 13 years ago. Why did you wait 13 years to write a book about it?
I didn't. I've been through about 8 edits of that book. So when I got back from the trip, so we ended the trip here, but then we did a kind of like a trip traveling around India for a while. I got back to Harrogate, decided I wanted to move straight back to Amsterdam for the creativity. Moved back, didn't jump straight into writing, jumped straight into a relationship with Nina, my wife, my now wife. And then I moved back to do some studies in between in creative writing and process design, system design, with the Open University back in the UK. That kind of took a lot of my time, a lot of my headspace, but I was using a lot of the creative writing classes to start writing some of the stuff and see whether it would even be like a soundboard, right? Get some feedback from some students, but also from some well-renowned writers, teachers, which went quite well. And I enjoyed the actual writing process and learned a lot. And then I moved back to the Netherlands. And while I was jobless and searching for work, I started writing everything, digitizing basically all of my handwritten logs, but then also seeing whether any of my blogs were actually worthwhile transferring into a book, right? So I had to go through that process, and then I got a bit artsy and started going through edit after edit after edits and having some ARC readers read through stuff and give me some feedback. And it just took a while. And then Corona happened. Kids happened. My father died just after my first daughter was born. So there was a lot of grief involved in there as well, which spanned out time within writing, right? And then you reach out to a lot of authorship, like authors' houses for publishing, and people didn't want it at first, right? Like there was no want for this style of travel book at the time. Maybe it was the publishing houses I was reaching out to, but I just kept kind of going through it and still didn't really have anything coming back. So that maybe dented my pride a little bit. And then I found out through reading some other travel authors that they liked controlling their own publishing process. And I'd never thought about it. So I actually went through Amazon KDP and published my own.
The blurb I'm reading here, it does reference Dervla Murphy. Now, she probably, in a lot of cyclists' minds, is the kind of the person who wrote the book about cycling to India. Did you have that book with you when you were traveling? Did you have it in your back pocket, and were you trying to emulate her? I hope you didn't take a gun with you, because she famously took a revolver, didn't she?
No. She did. Yeah, and had to use it, I think. And was it in Pakistan as well? No, I did not. I think it's interesting that you'd asked me before whether, the book started in Georgia and whether we kind of like filtered through, because she did a quick whiz through Europe, right, in the early parts of her chapters. And then I think where it really fits with Dervla Murphy is the fact of unexpected locations capturing your heart. So where she was possibly a little bit afraid because of the stereotypes of unknown or stereotypes of media which had been presented with, such as Pakistan, right? And then actually arriving in those places and finding that you sometimes wouldn't want to leave them, that it was a breaking of the heart. That happened in Georgia. That happened in Iran, most definitely, right? So I think there's definitely a passage there, and also maybe been a little bit unprepared. Well, a lot unprepared for a lot of the journey. Yeah, there's definitely a comparison in there.
And 13 years ago, have you done anything since? Have you been in any other long-distance cycling adventures since?
Not so much with little kids, no. There's one which is coming into my mind. My son's now 3 years old, so he'll start going to school, the same school as his older sister, next year, basically. So one which is breeding in my head is actually to go to Nakhchivan, which is a breakaway state, or the other side of Azerbaijan that sits on the other side of Armenia, to then try and do a bit of a race back towards Utrecht and try and do that in a time kind of like, timed period, maybe around 4 weeks to 6 weeks. So you're looking at really pushing the kilometres and long times in the saddles. So I think pushing myself and testing myself in a different way. Other than that, it tends to be a couple of days here, a couple of days there, right? Like with some bags on my racer. And I've definitely got a more polished bike this time, which I wouldn't be taking on a long distance. I'd need to upgrade the wheels. This one's more for hitting the kilometers per hour, really. Yeah.
You do know that children come home from school in the afternoon?
Yeah, I do. It's not boarding school.
I'm not convinced by your excuse that your younger child is suddenly about to start school as an excuse for actually going away for 6 weeks. but because they do come back in the evening.
It's because then there's one drop-off point, right? So it's we moved into this village in Viana, south of Utrecht, and instead of then having two drop-off points, so normally my wife will go and do my son, and I will take my daughter to school, two different places, two different pickup points in the evening as well. So we've already started talking about this, that it's always kind of been in my mind, and I've had a bit of an impasse for big journeys, and it's got to come up soon. So that makes it a little bit easier. We've also got the backup of her parents here as well. Her dad, I think, likes to see that I'm doing these journeys occasionally and keep myself interested and fresh. So, thanks for the kickback, though.
And in terms of the Netherlands, have you? I mean, I can't. Having cycled in the Netherlands a few times myself, it's difficult to fault the place. It is just a very easy place to cycle. You really are in. It's a bit of a cliche, but it is a cycling heaven, a cycling nirvana. Have you had the chance to explore other parts of your adopted country by bike?
Oh yeah, most definitely. Yeah. So whether it be across to Brabant, which I think is a bit like Yorkshire, technical cities, old historical cities, lots of farmland, speak very funny. So I head down there quite often. I've been across to the east where you start to get a little bit of a wobble on the horizon, right? And you go through the sand dunes, the Veluwe, you start to head towards the German border. Been further north, so up towards Zwolle and that kind of area, but there's still a bit more to kind of do as discovery. I know you've done some cycling down by Middelburg and the islands further south where I go towards Belgium. That's on my route actually at the moment, is to do the kind of 8-hour trip down towards Middelburg and maybe do a bit of an overnighter with a friend from Leeds who lives further up in Hilversum, who's not an experienced cyclist at all. So I'm trying to get him out to show him the introductions of the saddle. And he's now like 50. So I'm trying to introduce him into the pleasures of like touring cyclists. And then heading down towards Belgium really is the other big exciting thing. But you say it's the utopia, and I think it is in one sense because we adopt it as our everyday mode of transport, right? You see from children of 4 years old cycling by the side of the road, which you'd never see in the United Kingdom, to 80-year-olds, 85-year-olds. One of my neighbours just across the road, he's 95. And I think he's struggling from dementia, and he's still occasionally on his bike, or he's on a trike with one of his mates, just having a yabba. He's got loads of vintage bikes in the garage next to my house. Like, you see everybody doing it, but the thing which is not in the utopia for me, being from Yorkshire, is the fact that there's not many hills here. Now, you say it's flat, and that can be everybody's like utopia of cycling, but to me, that can be also a boredom, right? Because when you cycle up a hill, there's also a moment when you get to the top and you finally get to the top of a good hill. You've worked at it. You've been through the pain, and then you get the downhill. Then you get the pace. Then you get the slightly scary moments, but you get that 14-year-old boy inside you comes out, and you get to fly down a hill at 60, 70 kilometers an hour. It's, the adrenaline rush is unbelievable, but you don't get that very often around in the Netherlands. So,
yeah, that is one downside, but there we go. It's I hope to go back to the Netherlands at some point soon to do more cycling there. I'm not sure whether I'll ever get to Iran, perhaps one day, you never know, or India. But good luck with the book. And if people are interested in either finding out more about you or finding out about the book, perhaps getting a copy of the book, where can they go? Where's the easiest place to find the information?
Easiest place to grab the book actually is Amazon. So your local Amazon, as you might say, right, which is just Saddlesore, England to India. That's the easiest SEO title to find. Otherwise, saddlesore.studio is a website that I'm kind of putting together on a very relaxed kind of cadence, occasionally just putting some new blogs up there. I built it with a kind of a Dutch Strato builder, which is like a CMS, which is sometimes in Dutch and confusing me. But yeah, I'm just kind of putting some information, some images on there occasionally, probably a link to this as well when it comes up, and then using that as my my kind of growth page right now.
Yeah, and I can see there you've actually got your social media links on there as well.
Yeah, I've got some stuff, but a lot of that is now there's a Facebook page that we originally kind of used while we were cycling, but that really disappeared. There is a very, very bad video on YouTube. So basically point of view with a GoPro. Nothing like your beautiful videographies, Andrew. Like, I must admit, like, I really enjoy listening to your podcast and then watching the space as well. I think the quality of your videography is very high quality, and I'd love to pick your brain about that another time. But yeah, you can definitely look at the visual quality and the changing of the locations by watching that very fast-paced GoPro footage on YouTube as well. That's linked on the website as well. You can definitely see that. But other than that, the socials have pretty much died. I'm going to have to start putting more stuff on my own Instagram again. But it's finding the time to do it, isn't it? When you've got a busy job and you've got kids, and most of you does not want to interact with social media. You actually just want to get out on the bike when you get a spare time, and you're given those hours to do so.
Yeah, so that's Saddlesore.studio, and I've just found that video. I'll watch that once we've finished chatting. So good luck with the book. Thank you for chatting, and have a nice winter on and off the bike in the Netherlands.
Thank you, Andrew. Really pleasure to meet you as well and share the story. Thank you.
And thank you to Tom, and apologies, as with my apologies to everybody else who is appearing in this podcast in January of 2026. Apologies for the slight delay in getting your episode of the podcast published. The interview was actually recorded back in, the beginning of November, I think, and, 2 months. It's not too bad. Right, that is it for episode 96. Episode 97, which should hopefully be with you next weekend, is a chat with Tristram Newey. He's appeared on the podcast before, and this time he's going to be talking about cycling in the Faroe Islands. So that's next weekend, episode 97. In the meantime, if you'd like to get in contact with the podcast, you can visit cyclingeurope.org/contact, and all the contact details there. If you'd like to support the podcast, thank you to the few people who do. You can find out how to do that by visiting cyclingeurope.org/support. In the meantime, between now and next weekend, for episode 97, thank you for listening and happy cycling.